Well, hello there, Penn State fans, football fans, and wrestling fans. We have a special edition of the Blue White Breakdown here in late March. Recording this on Monday. We just ended a big week. We're going to start a big week. I'm Bob Flounders, joined by Austin Hertzog. We're going to combine things because there's so much to get to in the world of prominent Penn State sports. Penn State football is getting ready to kick off its spring drills. We're recording this on a Monday. They're going to start on Tuesday with the James Franklin press conference and a practice availability. So I think a lot of fans and a lot of media members are looking forward to that. But we also have to get to what the Penn State wrestling team was able to accomplish over the weekend at the NCAA Wrestling Championships at Wells Fargo Center. I was there along with Jim Carlson to cover it for PennLive. It was thrilling. There were so many highlights throughout the three-day event. And Austin, it's almost hard to find a starting point because of all the things that happened and all the things that Penn State was able to do and overcome. But I know you are a huge wrestling fan, not just Penn State, but Pennsylvania Prep. You were kind of the guy that started PennLive's wrestling podcast that I did with Jimmy through most of the Penn State season. We had some great guests on it. We didn't just focus on Penn State, but Austin, it was hard not to focus on Penn State, especially over the weekend and especially what they were able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, that wasn't much of an introduction, considering the people don't necessarily know who I am.
I know. Well, I didn't want to. I was going to let you maybe. I didn't know if you wanted me to. I didn't know if you wanted me to maybe explain who you were. I just didn't want to. I wanted you to kind of introduce yourself to the fan base.
I think that's perfectly fair. Hey, Blue White Breakdown people. I'm PennLive sports editor Austin Hertzog. You might not see me or hear my voice all that much, but I'm kind of behind the scenes, hopefully pulling the strings. And like Bob said, was a passion project of mine as I came into PennLive last summer was to help up the wrestling coverage as well, in addition to continuing the great football coverage that Bob and the team were doing. So one of those big things was introducing the PennLive Wrestling podcast, which Bob really jumped on and did an amazing job all year with Jim Carlson. So really excited to see the growth of that and some of the great guests they had. Truly, a lot of those are evergreen people. So go back and listen to some of those episodes because there's such good stuff. And really, whether it's programs from around the state or also some people around the Penn State program, really interesting stuff. So definitely go back and check those out. But yeah, in this moment, we're talking about the NCAA Wrestling Championships, and Bob, to your point, quite a weekend for Penn State. 2 champions. It's amazing that we've gone this far and haven't said the name Carter Starachi. Became the first 5-time NCAA champion. Also joined the top of the podium by Mitchell Mesenbrink. And also Penn State had a runner-up in Josh Barr. 10 All-Americans overall. That's the first time in school history, and only became the second team to do that, joining Minnesota's 2001 team. So, yeah, I mean, what a time for Penn State fans. It's been a time for Penn State fans, but truly 10 All-Americans, 5 third-place finishers in Haynes, Lillidahl, Bo Bartlett, Shane Van Ness, and Tyler Kasich. Really, really impressive stuff. But I want to hear about your overall experience there. Like you said, you were down at Wells Fargo Center for the 3 days of just nonstop action. What was the experience like for you?
So it was. I just think it was literally the day started with wrestling and it ended with wrestling. But it seems like a long day. But the passion of the fans and the matches, the intensity of the matches. I don't want to say it didn't sail by, but it moved very quickly because there was always something to look forward to. There were a lot of media credentialed for the event, and they were somewhere on the mat, but it was a pretty tight quarters. The rest of a lot of us were upstairs, kind of where the Flyers and the Sixers play there. And when you're not courtside or you're not ice side, the best vantage point is at the very top of Wells Fargo Center, and they have media there. And I am a little bit scared of heights. So that first day I was able to see it, but I was like, I didn't want to get too close to the ledge because it was a little daunting, but it was a great view to see all of the wrestlers going at once. And when I think about, getting a chance to cover Penn State wrestling this year for the first time off of a Penn State football season and really kind of look at them and get to be close to Cale Sanderson and the wrestlers with availabilities in season, see some matches, and then have it conclude on the big stage. I just can't tell you, for the average sports fan, I've covered a lot of wrestling in my past. I've been doing it for a while, but it was mostly high school wrestling. There is something very special about wrestlers because, and I know that every other sport, the discipline and the training and the contact, all of that comes into play. But I just can't stress enough that watching them, I think the difference with wrestlers is the discipline, and they all have to maintain weight. And to be at this level, I don't want to say the easy part is getting out there in wrestling, but what they have to do in terms of maintenance, it's just a never-ending process. Some of the hardest things they do is just kind of getting to weight to compete. And for them to go as hard as they did, and for Penn State to do what they did, and they had a little bit of heartbreak there in the quarterfinal round. They had some top-seeded guys go down. They were surprises, but for them to bounce back and just rip apart people in the consolation rounds, that they needed to do to get that team title. Or no, they didn't need to get the team title. They needed to do that to get a new team record, which they did again with 177 points. But they never really lost focus. And it was just very impressive. The 10 All-Americans, but just watching what they do just to get ready to wrestle, it's phenomenal. And it's not just the Penn State kids. Everyone, I would say, Austin, probably 3/4, 80%. Not everyone is a natural wrestler that could just wrestle at their walking around weight. Almost all of them are pulling weight, and it's a grind. By the end of the tournament, Austin, there were guys with black eyes, they're bloody, broken noses, and afterwards the way that they celebrated. It's the sport of wrestling, I think, in a lot of ways, is unlike any other sport. And it was kind of a privilege for me to watch that play out at the highest level. Those guys gave it everything they had. And the finals, some of the finals were, a lot of them were low scoring, but that heavyweight final was just spectacular. And I'm glad it ended that way.
Yeah. It's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, I'm not a past wrestler, but I'm somebody who throughout my career of close to now 20 years is somebody who grew into covering the sport, also mainly at the high school level, and came up with a legendary wrestling writer named Don Seeley in Southeast PA. He was as dedicated of a wrestling writer as there was. So anyway, that's where my appreciation for the sport has grown so much. And to your point there, that was one of my biggest takeaways was after the semifinals, and Carter Sirachi spoke to the media after the semifinals, and he talked about how, I'm going to leave here and I have a lot to wait. I have a lot of weight to cut.
Yeah.
To get down to make weight tomorrow morning. And you know what? That's just part of my process, and I'm happy to do it because, like you said, now it's the easy part to go back out on the mat.
It is.
It's like that's part of the challenge. It's a full lifestyle commitment that as I've grown in this business, it's about appreciating the people who give that full commitment, those sort of elite mindset to be able to achieve whatever the goal is. And that's the thing about the wrestlers. It's not just, can I execute a move? Can I make this takedown? No, it's the full encompassing experience of being a wrestler and doing all the things that is required. And it's a full lifestyle thing. So absolutely. Yeah, that was one of my it was, as we've talked about throughout the year, of the not always getting to have as much access to the Penn State guys as maybe we'd like and be able to hear from them as much. I loved being able to hear from Carter, from Mesenbrink. I mean, their stuff on the podium was it was great to hear, great personalities. And so those two really stood out to me as guys that I loved being able to hear from more prominently and that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't even know where I was going, Bob.
Yeah, well, I think we could circle back to what you said about Carter. He is, but what I like about Carter, I feel like he's very genuine. And if he has something to say, as we learned on Saturday night, eventually you could pull it out of him, and he's gonna speak his mind. He's done it his whole career, whether he's called people out that he thought, deserved to be called out, or whether, but when he was talking about the weight cut, because He won at 184, but his first four, I think, were at 174. And, a couple weeks back, he said, it was pretty easy to get, at first it was pretty easy to maintain 184, but as his body got used to being up in weight, continued to grow a little bit, and it got harder and harder. Only Carter could. He kind of used it to his advantage because he's looking at it like, if I'm going to do all this stuff, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to take it out on somebody on the mat. And it just kind of fueled his fire, I thought. And he found a way to use it almost as a competitive advantage. It's like, you know what, you guys, if I'm going to do all this stuff, when I get out on that mat, somebody's going to have to answer for it. And I don't know if I might not be mistaken, but I might be mistaken. I think he only was taken down once the whole tournament. And it was the Minnesota freshman, I believe, in the Big Ten Championships. Right. And he had to win that in overtime. But he just put on a clinic, and what he does on the mat, doesn't make any mistakes, forces everyone through sheer pressure and will to kind of bend to him. That kid he beat in the finals was really, really, really good. And it was the second time they wrestled, but the way that he can break you physically and mentally, and his mindset, they're all the Penn State kids, have a little bit of attitude and confidence about them. And that's a credit to their staff. And they were good when they got there. But I thought he really took it to the next level, because that was a pretty big deal, right? He could have easily lost that match. There was very little separating those two. And we could have been talking about a guy.
You're talking the final.
Yeah, that got denied, and then the storyline is he couldn't get it done. And I don't want to say it like this, but you kind of get remembered for the last thing you do. So just very impressed with him, and he found a way to win.
That's the thing, though. Like Kekheisen was a defending champ. Like this. Yeah. This is the thing. Like the legend around certain guys, and we'll get to this later as we talk about Stevenson. But the margins are so thin, and there's so many really legit guys. Like Kekheisen, to me, had the match, or at least the sequence of the tournament, in his semifinal when he beat Max McAnally. The last scramble in that match was some of the best thing I've ever seen, honestly, on a wrestling match. That match was incredible. Please go back and find that of Kekheisen's win in the semifinal. But so that's the point, though, is that's an ultra elite guy who Starachi then beats in the final. He's also a NCAA champion. So yeah, it's the margins are so thin, and you got it. Starachi ends up for his career 104-4. Like what?
Yeah, and two of them were just
at NCAA level. Like what?
Yeah, two of them were injury defaults because he had to wrestle to win his fourth one on one leg. So it's even more phenomenal.
Yeah, it is wild. And while I was sort of covering it remotely, I was keeping tabs on all the Pennsylvania guys. And so it was nice to see that as we are Pennsylvania centric here with PennLive, that a in-state guy is the one who becomes that legend of the 5-time champ. So of course, Starachi being from Erie. So that was also nice to see. And also high performances from the other Pennsylvania hometown guys on Penn State roster with Haynes and Tyler Kasich. So yeah, really, really cool stuff there. Yeah, I mean, that was fantastic finish from Starachi and the whole bunch.
Yeah. I think when I look back on it, and there's so many things that Penn State was able to do, starting with, we didn't even talk about the fact it's fourth consecutive team title, 12 in the last 14 seasons. But honestly, all of that, it's hard to focus on one thing. But I mean, the two things that I'm going to remember most, well, three things. It'll be what Carter was able to do, but it was also the 10 All-Americans, the second time, it's only the second time it's ever been done. Minnesota 2001 did it. They did it without a finalist, which is even probably harder to do. But Penn State was able to do that. I was still, Austin, blown away with what they did the first two rounds when they went 20 for 20. And not only that, they went 20 for 20. And the very first wrestler that took the mat, just because of the way the sequencing was Braden Davis. It wasn't Luke. Luke had to wait. So the very first match is Braden Davis. He gets taken down like instantly, comes back to him. That was the only takedown in the first two rounds that Penn State allowed when they went 20 for 20. And I'm like, what did I just watch? Because that stat to me just is astounding. To go 10 for 10, 10 for 10, and only allow one takedown. I mean, it's just, the talent is just too good in the country for that typically to happen. But I still can't wrap my head around what they did early, what they did in consolation rounds after things didn't go their way in quarterfinals. And then, we didn't even talk about some of the injuries in Josh Bart, but I just think this is such a resilient team in addition to being such a talented team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that under Cale Sanderson, and we always talk about the ceiling of the room and what the standard is. And you see it there. I think that's proven out with that standard maybe being just a bit higher than maybe everywhere else because of the depth of talent.
Yeah.
That's why they're able to go 20 for 20 on day one. Because that one really, I mean, entering the tournament, Penn State was a minus 5,000 favorite to win the team title. So that was all academic. But to your point about, for me in wrestling, there are such thin margins. And to your point, not one guy with a slip there in that day one of taking care of business, everybody 20 for 20. That was really, you knew they were going to perform well, but 20 for 20 was something else. At the same time, though, then we go to day two, where, like you said, it's some of the semifinals didn't go their way. I mean, were you able to sense anything from the mood of anyone that was, it's disappointing, but you also got to pick yourself back up? Did you have any sense of anything around maybe feeling like they didn't max the potential there on day two?
I don't think so. The two one seeds that got beat, Tyler Kasak got beat, and also Luke got beat. The kid that Luke wrestled, Sheldon Seymour from Lehigh, an outstanding defensive wrestler who had seen Luke in a dual meet, and Santoro, the Lehigh coach, who is just a tremendous, not only was he a tremendous wrestler, another Pennsylvania guy, a Lehigh Valley guy, Bethlehem Catholic, where I'm from, the Bethlehem area. Shout out me. He clearly had Sheldon ready, scouted for Luke, and he was able to do some things. I thought Luke had 3 scrambles where I thought he was going to take him down. The kid fought it off, and then he just gutted it out. But I just think the quality of the field is such that you have to, if you don't capitalize when you should capitalize, you could easily lose, especially when you get past the first round, or the second round. And when you get into quarters, like you said, unless the kid is just exceptional, the 1 seed, the 8 seed and the 1 seed, like you saw it at other weights. There were some guys with some wrestlers who won that were not the 1 or 2 seeds. I mean, form did not always hold, but I feel like I just wanted to say something about Cale, because this was the first year I got to I went to a couple availabilities in the winter right after Penn State football, which we are going to get to, had lost to Notre Dame. And I'd really never been around Cale. I wasn't really sure kind of what he was like. And this icon is just and he just comes in to, they're getting ready to practice. He's got a hat on. He's got his water jug. He's got his head down. He just kind of looks at the media before he's getting ready to talk to us. And all of a sudden he just comes up and he goes, "Okay, what's up, guys?" And just down to earth, unassuming. If you didn't know who he was, he would have walked by you and you're like, who's this guy? Is he on the team? He looks like he could still wrestle. And all of the guys that kind of
probably can.
Penn State, all of the Penn State guys that aren't on the team are just like him, whether it's Aaron Brooks or all the guys that are kind of still in the area training, helping the Penn State kids. And to be that humble and just appreciative and, no smack talk, never loses his temper. Everything is just focus, and it just trickles down, I think. I mean, the wrestlers have their personalities. Carter obviously is a little bit fiery, but they all are just very interesting guys, and their composure. I guess it's their composure and their commitment is what I was just really, really impressed with. And it's obviously it starts with Cale, but for all that he's done and continues to do, he could use his platform to say whatever he wanted to do. And it's always about the kids. It's always about improving, and it's always about let's get excited about what we're going to do next in wrestling. And the kids all think, they're ready. It sets them up for the rest of their life. And I just couldn't be more impressed by. He sets the tone, they follow it, and it's just not the athleticism and the skill. There's another component to this, and I think it really starts with him, and he sets the right tone, and that's why they can bounce back. That's why at the end of the year, They are so focused, even though they have to do a lot of stuff just to get on the mat.
Yeah. It's about it's encapsulating all of it. It's about process. And so
Yeah,
that's the one thing that you get the sense there is that it's constantly about process. It's never about results. It's never about the past, the future. It's just about the process. And if you do the right things within the process, right, the right outcomes will come. There was one thing I wanted to bring up, Bob,
yep,
which as I was preparing
yeah,
for this and looking at last year's results, it got me thinking, while they did set the team point total record
yeah,
at 177 and last year had 172 and a half, was this really better than last year? Because last year they had 6 finalists, 4 champions. So you had Carter Starachi, Aaron Brooks, Greg Kirkvliet won at 285, and
yep,
Levi Haynes was a champion at 157. Levi, of course, this year makes the big jump to 174,
yeah,
finishes third. And then Bo Bartlett was a finalist, and so was Mesenbrink. So in a way, I'm like, that kind of jumps out as better to me, even
yeah,
though, but it's two different things. One was last year was those ultra elite 6 guys in the
yeah,
final. This, like we've said, there's 5 guys who are placing third, so that's nothing to be turning your head down about. But it struck me like, wow, 6 finalists, whereas this year it was 3. In a way, if in one lens, I'm almost more wowed by last year.
yeah,
What say
yeah.
you?
Yeah, it is. I think, not, I think that this team, the balance of this team, and it showed up in the dual meet and in some other matches, the balance of this team. But if you really think about it, they kind of, they were slightly rebuilding on the fly, not rebuilding, but reloading on the fly because they had, they had some great kids coming back. They lost some great kids, but Luke Lillidahl, a true freshman, in the lineup, ready to go. Tyler Kasak is, yeah, I think he was a redshirt sophomore. He was a guy that he lost in the first round last year, wrestled all the way back. And I do think, a guy like Kirkfleet, Stevenson was around this year, right? Or else, and he also was dealing with an injury, to his
Yeah.
credit, to get to the semifinals. I think the injury, the left leg, whatever happened, it flared up. He also ran into in the semis, he ran into the man of the, the eventual one of the biggest storylines along with Carter in the kid that beat Gable. But I do think that probably high end talent last year was a little bit better. But I think, I wonder what would have happened in a perfect world if this team wrestled last year's team. What would that how would that score have played out? I think the depth of this team and the quality of this team, there were no holes really in this lineup. And man, what they were able to do to like Iowa in that dual meet, when it was, I think the final score was 30-8, and Davis didn't wrestle. He wasn't going to probably win that match, I think, against Ayala, but it wouldn't have been a tech fall to win 30-8. And it was just, and I think that Iowa's got a win from the Buchanan kid over over Josh Barr, but it was like he could have easily lost that. I think you're right. It depends on how you want to look at it. I think the depth of this team and the fact that there were really no holes is what I'll remember. But I also know that there were some superheroes in last year's field. So you could look at it one way or the other, but I think the 177 and the 10, those two numbers are what kind of give this team the slightest edge.
Yeah, no, I think that's right because, yeah, 10, 10 is
Can't get any more than 10. That's all I know.
exactly. You've maxed out. You truly
Yeah.
have. You've
Can't get
maxed
11.
out there. Yeah, so there is that. And you talk about team building. It's always that team mindset, and that's one of the funky things that I find with individual sports is that you have to find that balance between pure focus on yourself, but also people lean on that collective mindset as well, whether it's to carry them up, to help carry up the collective. There's also that collective mindset as well that goes into it. So yeah, 10 out of 10 is you can't, like you said, can't do better than that. So yeah, not too shabby at all. Yeah, I thought it was a fun thought
Yeah,
exercise of,
it is.
that's 4 champs is pretty legit. Um, One of the other things, Bob, was you've alluded to it here, but Carter Starachi was let it be known how he thought about. Well, let's go back to the beginning, which is to say there was an interesting decision made by
Yeah,
ESPN's broadcast that put Carter Starachi's bid for number 5 in the first match of the night. Seemed a
yeah,
little curious because to many of us, especially those of us in Pennsylvania, would think that
yeah,
should be the main event. Instead, Carter went up first and took care of business. But that was the ESPN influence was very present there. It definitely got people talking, and ultimately, I don't think it was a bad thing. In part because of the way that the main event, eventual main event,
yes.
played out, which was Wyatt Hendrickson upsetting Gable Steveson, former Olympic champion. So that was, of course, huge headlines. But anyway, Carter didn't love being slotted in first. What was your experience in press with his mood there after that?
Yeah, so earlier in the day, like there were some warning signs that this could, at some point, he wins. There could be a reaction because Bo Nickel, the Penn State great who's now in MMA and punishing people there, he was there and he put something on social media about, and it was very sarcastic. He essentially said, you know, why is he going first? This is the main event of the night and you're putting it first. And he basically, I'm paraphrasing. I guess, other sports and boxing and MMA have it right. Why shouldn't they just put the main event on first? That makes a lot of sense, right? So you knew that if Bo was putting that out there, it doesn't take much. And I think that Carter, who again doesn't need much to get extra motivation, I think he took it a little bit as an insult, because of what he went through to get to this. That they were he probably I think he looked at it like he was being taken out of his routine where he could get ready to wrestle his match. He was going to go first. He didn't come out with the All Americans, and that's what actually led to he was actually, I think he was getting ready to wrestle before he really thought he had to wrestle. It's a little bit of short notice, and he didn't really consider it. I think ESPN was trying to sell the sport, get eyes on it right out of the gate. Right, you got a great match early, you got a great match late, but I think Carter did not want to be thought of as a warm-up act. He did not feel like he deserved to be made to taken out of his comfort zone. And I can see his side of it as well. And I don't know what the balance is, but you have to remember that, ESPN's kind of probably got the final say. They're trying to grow the sport. They're trying to get eyes on the coverage. That would be a way to do it, right? That would be a way to
Yeah.
do it. But I mean,
Well,
I could also,
I do need to throw in an aside, Bob, because if ESPN wants to grow the sport, they should actually have the coverage of it present on their apps
yeah,
and their website.
and
Like
they didn't.
the amount
You're
of
right.
digging I had to do just to get the mat cast normally, or
Yeah.
even have the results anywhere. Like, I mean, and that, like, in a way, I think they do an all right job on the coverage, and so I don't think it's a total indictment, but if you actually
Yeah.
wanna grow it, it
Yeah.
has to be a
All in.
multi-platform
All
attack
in.
as
Yeah.
opposed to, "Hey, we have the TV coverage and you can watch every mat on ESPN Plus," which is awesome, but
Yeah.
then you actually need to be able to find the content. So, anyway,
Agreed.
that was my experience from watching it, from being, remote and trying to monitor everything and, yeah, having to read the scrolls to try to get Madcast up so I could watch all 8 matches at once. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. It was definitely, he felt like he was throwing a curveball, and he was throwing a curveball. And uh, you know, credit to him for, he's not a guy that's gonna sit on his hands. If you give him an opening, he's gonna tell you what he thinks. And you could, from what he said, it's hard to find fault with it. I mean, ESPN did what they did. Once it was done, he had to adjust to it. He did adjust to it, but he let him know. And I think the ESPN should probably think about that moving forward, because I don't think it was. I don't necessarily think it was fair to him. And I think that, I bet you, if Kale really wanted to let you know what his feelings were on it, he'd probably say the same thing.
yeah. Although after the fact, I appreciated it in that it felt like it was it was appointment viewing then. If you had any interest in seeing that history, you better have it on at 7 o'clock because, and so like sometimes in other situations, well, maybe I'll miss the first few matches or whatever. No, it became appointment viewing. So to that end, I absolutely do understand the rationale because it really was. I'm watching my clock. I'm like, okay, gosh, I gotta make sure to stop cooking dinner because I gotta get the match on.
Yeah.
So there was that element to it. Actually, I had a funny thought. Nobody will ever go for this, but they should do like lottery style for the finals.
Yeah, good luck with that.
You get ball comes down.
Kentucky Derby draw.
Yeah.
For post positions, but
then 157 has to come out, hit the music. That would you want some anticipation?
Yeah.
That'd be pretty fun. Have all the guys out while they're doing their warm up, or I don't know. That could be fun. No one's ever gone for that. I just had that fun thought as I was thinking about how the match orders sometimes get manipulated and changed around and stuff like that. Right. So,
Austin, do you want to get to a little bit of Penn State news here, or did you have anything else on your plate? Did you have any thoughts on Stevenson and Hendrickson? Because we didn't really talk a lot about that. It did not involve a Penn State wrestler, but I'll tell you what, though, the buzz in Wells Fargo Center, because it became apparent very early in that match. I was working, and one eye on my work and one eye, on the crowd, and one eye, and I only have two eyes, not three. But I mean, you could tell early in that match that Hendrickson was here to go, and it was going to be heavy lifting for Stevenson to get by this guy. And the longer it went, like it's like any great upset, the longer it's close, the more uncertain the heavy favorite he starts to have. You could tell he wasn't quite as aggressive, and he knew he couldn't do some things against this guy. And then in the third period, wow, the roar of the crowd when they knew he was going to get that takedown and then be able to keep him on bottom. It was unbelievable, and it was really like the adrenaline rush, I think, for everyone in the Wells Fargo Center was legit, and you just didn't see it coming. It was surreal.
Yeah, it really was wild. And yeah, you're right. That final ride where he's able to just see it out, and I was like, Gable's like Stevenson explode, and no, Hendrickson. I mean, it's worth noting that like Hendrickson was not some flash in the pan. He was third last year.
Yes.
With Air Force, is doing this final year. I forget what they're calling it. With basically, he will serve continuing in the Air Force for his 5 years because of his time at the Service Academy, but is in this sort of co-op sort of deal where he's able to he was able to compete for Oklahoma State this year. And so, this is not a flash in the pan. And this guy is absolutely and that's actually the point that I did want to, that struck me, was that everyone was treating this as the biggest upset ever. And for me, I'm like, number one, it's heavyweight wrestling, which the margins are always so thin in heavyweight wrestling. Gable Stevenson has been doing different things for the past 2 years. His Olympic championship was in 2020. Like, we're now 5 years on from that. He had a stint in WWE. I saw the guy at WrestleMania last year after I was doing press around WrestleMania, and he was getting out of a car, going there for WrestleMania weekend. Like, he was not committed full time to wrestling. Right. He is now again, but I think that something needs to. This isn't the biggest upset. It's a huge upset, but at the same time, I think it. I guess what I'm saying is, I think that when people talk about the biggest upsets ever, I think it does a disservice to the other guy. The other guy is close. Hendrickson was close. I was seeing the analogy of people making to Pennsylvania high school wrestling of when Austin DeSanto beat Spencer Lee. It was a similar sort of roar in the crowd of unbelievable upset and whatever. At the same time, I go back to that one and I go, Spencer Lee was on one leg.
Yeah, the torn ACL. I was at the Giants Center for me. Yeah.
So I'm just like, again, it goes like, yes, those guys are fantastic, but the guy on the chase is also highly legit. Whether it was DeSanto, whether it's now Hendrickson, like, to me, it's an upset, but This is not it's not the stuff of I don't know. I just see upsets differently than I think other people do.
Yeah, Austin, I think we can both agree, and many wrestling fans who could get this reference will agree that the greatest upset in wrestling history was Loudon Swain beating Brian Shute in Vision Quest. If you guys ever saw that movie, maybe it was Matthew Modine's finest hour in the 80s when I was just a puppy. To me, that's the greatest upset in high school wrestling history, but not everyone's going to appreciate my sarcasm or my reference, but now they're going to go back and look and watch Vision Quest. This was one of my favorite movies.
I was just gonna say that's a little early for me.
I know. That's
But
why I preface
that said, I have heard of Vision Quest. I have
you
heard,
gotta
heard
see
of
it.
Vision
You
Quest.
have to see it.
I
You're gonna
I'm
you'll be ready to run through a wall after you watch this movie. Trust me.
I love it. Hey, let's go.
When
I
you
better
watch
go
this
back and
movie,
watch it.
once you put it on, you're not gonna turn. It's one of those movies that you're not. Madonna's in it, but I'm telling you, you will be. You're gonna come. You're gonna circle back and say, "Thank God you mentioned Brian Shute and Loudon Swain on the Blue White Breakdown," because now I'm hooked on the movie.
I love it. Yes, this is now
You're gonna
appointment
want to
viewing
watch it.
for me. I do now. Bobby did a hell of a sales job there. I don't know
I did.
how I can't
Believe
watch
me.
it.
You will. You're gonna watch it, and it's a little dated, but if you guys for the wrestling fans or the football fans, great movie, one of my all-time favorite sports movies. Check it out. And Austin, I think now is a great time. It's a great segue to talk about Penn State football because we do need to get to that, and it's a big year for Penn State football. They are not quite on the level of Penn State wrestling. They're trying to get there. They got close last year. I think they can get really even closer this year, but there's a couple of things that they're going to have to address in the offseason and get better at, or it could be close but no cigar yet again.
What are those things, Bob?
I'm
What are
glad
those
you
things
asked
that
me.
stand out to you that are
Yeah,
the most pressing
yeah,
needs or items to address?
yeah. So it's there's one glaring need, but there's also just a couple of other issues that go with that, and a lot of those are related to depth. James Franklin and his assistants between recruiting and development, they are always they're always going to be close. They have their NIL structure in order, which is very very necessary because the last couple of years have kind of been a learning experience, I think, for the best teams in that you don't want to really try and adjust on the fly in the portal and add too much talent because sometimes it doesn't always gel. If that happens, not only do you not have success, but you've also ticked off a lot of the guys you've recruited because you brought in other guys to come kind of step over them. So what you want to do is be selective in your approach to the transfer portal, but you also have to develop your talent and you have to keep a lot of players that could go to the NFL on the roster. Maybe not the surefire first round picks, but the guys that could be second, third, and fourth round. You have to have the financial program and assistance to get them, and that's what Penn State was able to do. I think with some of the people that are back on the team, whether it's Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, whether it's a guy like Drew Aller. I think he is. I don't think he's NFL ready, but it didn't hurt that they had the finances to kind of keep him from coming back. But they were able to keep a lot of guys that could have went, I think, on the team. But at the same time, they lose a guy that could be the first round pick in the draft in Abdul Carter. They lose the most productive tight end in Penn State history, and there's been a lot of great tight ends at Penn State and Tyler Warren, and those are going to be tough losses to overcome. The whammy with that is that Tyler Warren was not only great, but he was great because he had to be, because they just didn't have any help at wideout sufficiently. And so when you look at the spring, Austin, and you look at the offseason, they're so closer, they're so good at a number of spots if they stay healthy. But you just can't run the ball on every play, because if you could, they'd be really tough to beat. At some point, they're going to need to make some plays in the passing game against a good team. They couldn't do it against Notre Dame in the semi, or they would have won. They couldn't do it against Ohio State in the regular season, or they win that game. And so that's the question, right? Do the guys that they've added, and maybe they'll add another one, two very talented guys they've added in Devontae Ross from Troy and Kyron Hudson from USC, but it's kind of a 1-year deal. So how quickly can they get ready, and how quickly can they help, especially when you're losing a 1,200-yard option in the passing game? That is the number one story. But there are others. They have a new defensive coordinator. They are There's some areas that their depth is not where it needs to be, but there's some guys that could step up. I think it's a very talented team. There's going to be a lot of guys drafted off this team. But if somebody can't catch the ball on third date in the fourth quarter in a tie game, they're not going to win.
Are they forced? Warren became such a safety blanket. Was it potentially a circumstance of just lesser opportunities because you knew that you had that safety valve and that the potential is there for the receiver class to really now shine because that safety valve has moved on?
I think as the season went on, Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator, and James Franklin and Drew Aller, they realized that, hey, look, we have a guy that is a 260-pound freak of nature who can run it, who can throw it, who can catch it. But if you put a smaller person on him, he is absolutely going to run over him, or he could just high point him. There's really nothing you could do. You had to double team him, and that opened up some things. But I would say this, this is James' 12th year. He came in 2014. There's really, and this wide receiver, it's a long time. They've only had 3 receivers really that I think Penn State fans can really remember. And it's been a long time. Those are tremendous athletes in Chris Godwin, obviously, KJ Hamler, who was a second-round pick of the Broncos, and Jahan Dotson, who has some Lehigh Valley ties, a first-round pick. But those are the 3, right? Everyone else has just had his moments. They've never been playmakers. They've had some good tight ends throughout Franklin's run, but he's talked about it. They're generating more big plays, but they just don't have a guy in the passing game that can turn a 10-yard catch into an 80-yard touchdown the way that Jahan Dotson could, or the way that KJ Hamler could. Now, you look at Ohio State and Jeremiah Smith and a bunch of other guys. That is you need somebody who can turn the game around with one play. So as good as Tyler Warren was, he wasn't really that kind of player. He was a great player. They have the kid they have from Troy could do that. I think Tyseer Denmark, who is from Imhotep, is a guy that they like, but it's one thing to do it in practice. It's one thing to do it, when you're at Troy. It's another thing to do it in the Big Ten, or it's another thing to do it in the playoff semifinal when the game is tight. And that, to me, that's the question. They are a really, really good team, and they can do a lot of great things. And a lot of the teams that beat them last year are replacing a ton of talent, whether it's Oregon or Ohio State or Notre Dame. But they have to find 1 or 2 guys in the passing game that Drew can be comfortable with, because they're not going to roll over everyone. There's going to be 2 or 3 games that are going to be hanging in the balance, and they just get nothing. They get nothing from their receiving core, and that has to change.
What's your experience? You've obviously been through plenty of spring practice seasons, if you will. What do you look for, and what are the measurements of growth that you might see as your time reporting on Penn State football?
Yeah, I think the coaching staff can figure it out pretty quickly. It's part of it is what they see in those winter conditioning sessions where guys have actually put on good weight, or their attitude is right, because it's not all that different when we were just talking about wrestling and the margins being pretty thin once you get to the best 4 to 6 guys in the field, even maybe the best 8 guys. For it's a lot of that is, who can we trust? Who can the quarterback trust? Who can the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator trust in a big moment, whether to call a play, to influence the decision? Can we go for it on 4th down? Who's Drew comfortable with? Who can I send on a blitz? All of those, it's about gaining confidence, not only in Drew, but it's also, you're gaining the confidence in your position coaches that I can put you on the field and you can win a one-on-one matchup when we scheme it up. And all of that kind of comes through on the practice field. The spring practice itself, the contact's kind of limited. They're not going to expose any of their good guys to any hazardous situations. They're looking at the guys that they think can take a leap, or guys that have separated themselves, and even the mental side of it, it's important. All of that stuff is critical. The good thing I think about this Penn State team is if they stay healthy, they have fewer questions than most programs. But I do think given what's happened, I do think that the wideouts are clearly the guys that, they have to gain the trust of James. They have to gain the trust of Kotelnicki. They have to gain the trust of Drew. And it might not happen just in spring. It might happen in off-season workouts that are unsupervised. It might actually happen in the first or second week, later in the summer. And the other thing, Austin, is with their schedule this year, they don't leave their home, I think, until the fifth game. They play Oregon
week 5, to
and they
UCLA.
play
Right, we were going through that.
three non-conference foes that should not be. So you can almost use that as an extended. I don't want to disrespect the teams, but with Penn State's talent, they can take long looks at anyone they need to take a long look at. So the schedule's favorable. They're not tested early, but they have to get. I mean, this is crucial because it's the finishing touches on what they could be. The offensive line is the best probably offensive line since '94. It's a deep group. They have a couple of questions on the defensive side. They lose 2 great safeties. They lose their leader in Kobe King, but I think all that can work itself out with who they've recruited. They got to keep Denai Dennis Sutton healthy at defensive end because they don't have Abdul and they lost some key depth pieces. But if you don't hear James Franklin and Drew Aller raving about a receiver that is either new or young, it's going to be a bad sign. So I think that's what you need to look for is you need James because he doesn't want to be like the boy who cried wolf. He doesn't want to talk about last year. He talked about Liam Clifford and Harrison Wallace and how they had arrived, and it was just inaccurate. It was Tyler Warren because those guys just had their moments. He's not going to talk about a receiver this year unless he's pretty sure he's going to be the guy. So that to me is the whole key to the offseason. At what point do you hear Drew Aller, some prominent offensive players, and Andy Kotelnicki and James, if they're all in unison about this guy is separated himself, that's a great sign for Penn State because that's really what they need. And if they don't have it, they did not bring all these guys back to get to the Final Four. They brought everyone back to get to the championship game. And I'll say this, if they're healthy and they're not in the championship game, I don't think it's going to be received very well. I really don't.
Interesting. So we got the blue-white game on Saturday, April 26th at 2 p.m. When do practices begin?
Practices are, so we're recording this on Monday. I've lost track of what time it is.
March.
It's the week after St. Patty's Day. As we're recording this, it'll be the Tuesday. That will be the first practice. There's also a pro day Friday up in State College. Penn State's prominent players, there's about 5 of them. They're all going to work out. None of them could really work out at the combine because the season went too late. They were gritting it out, gutting it out into late January almost, and their bodies just had not bounced back. So Abdul Carter probably going to run. Tyler Warren probably going to run. The safeties are going to run. It's Kobe King. He has some things to prove. So from here, really, this is really the start. Really the start of Penn State's quest to take the next step. And I think they have to. And it's going to be because look, Nick Singleton's not coming back. Kaytron Allen's not coming back. Drew Aller should not become, Drew Aller can't come back. So It's going to be a very different world at Penn State next season. And this is their best shot. It really is. Denai Dennis Sutton ain't coming back. So this is really it. They have the team to do it. They still got to do it. But it's all about the wideouts. PennLive will have it covered. But yeah, we're going to be writing a lot about this. And I want to see if they get 2 of them to step up. It's going to be a really hard team to beat.
Love it. Bob, this was fun, man. Appreciate you having me.
We're going to do it again. I just don't know when. And I promise.
Okay.
I promise the listeners and the viewers that the next time Austin and I are on a podcast, the Blue White Breakdown, Austin is going to commend me and compliment me for forcing him to watch Vision Quest because it's going to change your life. Every time I've seen it like 25 times. If it comes on, Austin, if I don't have something pressing at PennLive, and I might, I'm going to watch it. I can't recommend the movie enough. You're going to get fired up. And so
I'm going to
check back.
I might be back next week for a full film review.
Check back when Austin's back on, because he's going to be singing the praises of Matthew Modine Loudon Swain, and an all-star cast. It's going to
I
change your life.
love it. I believe, Bob, I believe it.
All
Hey,
right.
Vision Quest. Let's go.
You got it. All right.
Bob, it was fun,
listen,
man.
It was a lot of fun. I think we talked for about an hour and a half, but we got to a lot.
No, we're at 53
Really?
minutes. We're
I know,
good.
I know.
That's
I
the
know.
sweet
But,
spot. We're under an hour.
Yeah.
The people were on the edge of their seat. They're now going to go down to their local Blockbuster to get Vision Quest.
If they're trying to
no
go to Blockbuster, it's going to be a chore, but there's plenty of avenues to stream it. Watch it. Austin,
That's
great
right.
chatting with you. I want you back on, not just during wrestling season, but hopefully we'll get to do some things during Penn State's off season. Looking forward to it. But thanks for helping me with Penn State wrestling all season. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to pursue it right after Penn State football. I enjoyed every dual meet. I enjoyed the NCAA championships. I enjoyed the availabilities. I enjoyed getting to know the wrestlers and Cale Sanderson. It's a fascinating program, and it's not going away. So I had a ton of fun. Thanks to you, and guys, thanks for listening. We'll be back later this week with more episodes of the Blue White Breakdown podcast.